Hey everyone, welcome to Verve Cycling's Haute Route recap. This is Shawn Heidgen, your regular presenter with Verve Cycling, and today I have a special guest with us. It's one of the hard men of cycling, Magnus Backstedt, and even though I'm sure all of you know the name and know some of his awesome accomplishments, I'm still going to ask Maggie to give us a brief bio and maybe an update of what he's working on these days. Maggie?
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Magnus Backstedt. I'm a former professional bike rider. I used to ride at the very top level for the better part of 15 years, and some of my accomplishments: winner of Paris-Roubaix, stage in the Tour, stage in the Giro, and so on. Rode for some of the biggest teams in the world as well throughout this whole time. So my experience with training, coaching, and everything else is obviously going back a few years now, and that's actually something that I've just started doing a bit more of again. Is getting myself back into coaching and trying to help other athletes at whatever level to take benefit from my experience. So that's the short of it.
And Maggie, how long have you been training or using power?
I've been using power since about 2002. I bought my first power meter. So I've in the beginning it was very much sort of just see the numbers and try and learn to understand them, and then as things moved along, I ended up with coaches that were really capable of evaluating data, and that's when it really started kicking off in terms of how I progressed with all that.
Awesome. All right. Well, everyone, you've got another awesome resource to ask questions with during this webinar and presentation. I did just want to remind you that, as always, you guys are on mute. We are recording the webinar, so we do that just for the best sound quality possible. So feel free to ask questions during the presentation. Just use the chat box to do so, and Maggie and I will keep an eye on the chat box as we go along and take the time to answer. At the end, we'll also have a question and answer session too, so you guys can get everything answered that comes up during the webinar, or even if we didn't cover things that you were looking to get covered or answered. So with that, let's get going. The brief outline for today overview is, again, some of this is going to be review. It'll be lessons learned and possibly how to do it better next time if you decided that you need to come back and tackle the Haute Route again, or if you're planning on another either epic single day event or multi-day event in the future. I always called it the good, the bad, the ugly during races, whether it was myself or I was going over things with athletes. And it's questions to ask yourself. What went right, or what did you do well? What went according to plan? What didn't go so well? What could you do better next time? And what did you learn to make an improvement on the next time? I think those are all important things to go over, whether you were competing or you were completing this event. It's still a huge undertaking, and if I think many of you are on board for doing something similar in the future, it's always good to take a look back and reflect and look at the things that went right and things that you could do better. Then we're going to go over, just a basic schedule, the plan, uncontrollables, things like pacing. That was such a huge aspect of the data analysis and the training and coaching that I went over during the Haute Route. Maximizing your time in the saddle and also maximizing recovery time, training and preparations, and then, like I said, we'll have a brief question and answer period. So first things first, what to pack. An interesting thing that I noticed, I did mention in the previous webinars that, don't change your position, have everything dialed in, but inevitably some people, I found out that some people got a new bike 3 or 4 days before they left, or they had to change a saddle, or, put new cleats on their shoes. Things like that came up during the event that I found out. And my general recommendation is to have your bike and equipment dialed in 30 days out. You really want to minimize changes that your body has to deal with in such a big event under stress. Maggie, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I was going to say, if I can add something to that, I think I think you're looking at probably more like 60 days out from a bigger event like that to have your equipment dialed in. Obviously, if something breaks, then you may have to change it again, but that comes in under your sort of uncontrollable things that may happen, that you have to work on. But you know, equipment has to be sort of, you have to get used to it to be able to perform in the best possible way, and also not to get injured and so on. And a lot of those little niggles that you get in a multi-day event, and certainly if you're looking at doing a 3-week Haute Route again, they are coming from change of cleats, change of saddle, saddle that gets knocked around a bit in travel. So packing your bike and stuff like this comes down to be very, very important for the longer the rides that you do are getting.
Well, see, even Maggie's even doubling it. So there you go. I mean, the need to just have everything dialed as far out as possible. 60 days. You heard it from the pro himself. You know, you just really need to minimize the changes that you're going to, you know, make your body have to do. And something that I will send everyone to, I will send a bike measurement diagram, because most of you will have to either ship or fly with your bike, or like, you know, Maggie mentioned, it gets knocked around if you're, you know, throwing it in vans or trucks. I always recommend traveling with a bike diagram that has all of my measurements noted on it, because, and it doesn't matter like how you're taking the measurements, it just matters that you know how you're taking the measurements. Know your seat height, know your cockpit length, or, you know, your reach, or anything, any measurement that could possibly change on your bike, have it written down. You know,
Totally agree with you on that one, Shawn. That's it's the one thing that lives on my phone all the time. It's effectively that sheet, and I'll keep that with me for various different types of bikes as well. So and nowadays even for my daughter's bikes.
There
so
you go.
Make sure you got that one.
Awesome. And unfortunately, I think anyone who did any of the routes this year experienced extreme weather conditions. Sometimes people will make fun of me because even when I went to Kona, I packed thermal shoe covers. But I always bring more than I ever think I will need, and bring multiples. I think you just can't be too prepared. You never know what weather conditions can happen or change. Even if you look at the weather and it's supposed to be beautiful all week, I still think it's worth throwing it, you know, in your bag and just bring it and be prepared.
And that's something that, you know, at the Tour de France and going to the Tour de France, for example, we usually pack the whole suitcase of every single possible weather gear that we could find. And so basically whatever the team gave us at the start of the year, added that into a suitcase, and then took some more stuff as well on top of that, so that you never end up in this position where you weren't prepared for a weather change. And certainly if you're going up into the high mountains like we were at the Haute Route, weather changes within, you know, half an hour, and you're going from very nice weather to really cold. And I spoke to a number of people, and I always say to them as well, make sure that you bring in your raincoat with you, even if it looks like it's going to be a 25-degree day. By the time you get up to 2,500 meters of altitude and start descending, it's not particularly warm up there, and just putting your raincoat on for the descent will give you the opportunity to like keep your chest clear. And that's one of the things that will save you from getting a bronchitis when you're doing a 3-week ride like this.
Yep, for sure. There's an old saying, I think, something like, any cyclist worth his salt always has a rain jacket with him. You know, I think.
Yeah.
You can't be too prepared. The other thing I always pack is I have a little tiny tool bag that just, you know, it just gets thrown in my bike box. I think it actually just stays in my bike box. And it's small spare parts that break easily. I know that there's neutral support, and I know that there's mechanics, but it's just peace of mind for me. You know, for me, it's usually a spare link for a chain, a spare chain, derailleur hangers that are easily bent, seat post clamps that you can snap, and cleats for my shoes. Did I miss anything there, Maggie?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I usually just bring 2 pairs of shoes instead.
Oh, there you go.
And actually, I do have a spare set of cleats as well. But there's 2 things that I always travel with, and that's 2 sets of shoes. One pair always goes in my backpack when I'm traveling to the ride that I'm doing, together with my helmet.
Mhm.
A lot of the time, if I know that I only have a couple of hours before, I'm flying in late at night, and then I've got to get up and ride the next morning, I usually make sure that I put a set of kit in the bag as well, so that you do end up getting to the place where you go knowing that you got something to get you through the next day. But 2 pairs of shoes is one thing. Anything can happen to your shoes if you fall off your bike and you scrape them, you tear the sole off, you can snap the sole. There's so many things that can happen, and all of a sudden you're standing there with what is effectively one of your 3 contact points with the bike no longer being something that you're used to, because you're having to go out and buy a pair of shoes that you haven't used before, haven't seen before, never even let alone try them on before, and now all of a sudden you have to ride 170, 180 kilometers of 4,000 meters of altitude in a day. That's just asking for trouble. So don't throw away your old shoes if you're getting them. Ideally, if you find a set of shoes that work well for you, get another pair and keep them going. When the old shoes are starting to get a bit worn, then leave them as your spare backup shoes and continue with the new shoes that you have. And just keep an eye out so that people don't change the models and start producing different types of shoes. And if you hear any rumors like that, buy a couple of pairs of them, so that you don't have to change over at least the next year or so.
Excellent advice. Yep. On the bike, nutrition, if your stomach's sensitive, if you have food allergies or intolerances, or if there's something that you know works really well for yourself, bring it. You don't always have to depend on what's in the aid stations. It's great to take advantage of it, but if you're really going for a personal best or competing in this event, I think it's important to use what your body is used to, and something that that you can tolerate day after day when you're really tired or it's hot or it's cold in all weather conditions. Cyclist first aid. This is a big one. Again, there's a medic tent, but just having this in your room, knowing that you're going to be pushing your body to the limits and things are going to get sore and chafed and raw, having some antibiotic ointment, even, some cortisone cream, topical stuff, or chamois cream or settle sore ointment, massage recovery oil, and embrocation cream or lotion, I think can help. And those are just, I call it the cyclist first aid kit. Again, you could have other stuff too, but these are things that you're likely going to use at some point during the week.
Yeah, totally agree with him.
Okay, and a post-ride small backpack with towel, a change of clothes and shoes, and a recovery snack or some drink mix that you just need to put water in. For me, it's always important to have a post-event plan, and whether there's going to be a car that you can get access to, or you can ask, there's usually some sort of setup. Maggie, maybe you can fill me in on this, where you can go and get sort of a day pack that the race organizers or your travel company will organize for you. And it's just being able to get out of that chamois, wash yourself off, and get something to snack on.
Yeah, there's definitely that happening at the Haute Route, and like you said, it's one of the most important things. Like, people talk about how important it is to get that recovery drink into you. The most important thing is to finish off your ride by taking all your wet kit off and actually getting something dry on you that's going to keep you healthy. Then you get the recovery drink into you. So I think that the whole how to do this, the placing of all these things, it kind of got a bit mixed up in should we call it general media. First off, you just get yourself a dry base layer on. Make sure that the clothing that's the closest to your chest gets dry, and the rest of you follows after that. And then once you've got nice and warm and wrapped up again, that's when you start thinking about how to recover further. Because unless you've actually finished off the ride and your body kind of feels, okay, I'm starting to recover now, I'm getting warm and I'm getting relaxed, then you haven't actually finished the ride. So why do the post-ride drink and go forward from there?
Yeah, especially when you're wet too.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Even just sweating, you know, it just takes so little to get ill at that point. So yeah, just get
Yep.
changed quickly.
Okay. And now here is this next slide. I'll send everybody a Word document of this that you can easily edit. But for me, when I first started racing, I didn't have the mental checklist that I could go through in my head. So I literally had to have this out every single time and check things off to make sure that I had it. And the goal of this is to make sure that you're prepared, but also for me, actually checking things off the list, it was removing mental stress from me, knowing that I was prepared and knowing that I had everything. You know, nothing's worse than when you're sitting on your way to an event or the start line and you're like, oh my God, did I bring my sunglasses? Oh, did I bring my gloves? You know, or rifling through your bag trying to look for them. If you've done the checklist, you can just boom, check it off the list and you're good to go. Same with you, Maggie?
Well, I was the other person though that went the other way, that just had it all in my head. And I guess after about, so when I raced at you know, my very highest level, I kind of never unpacked the bag.
Yeah.
So my racing bag was what it was, and the only thing I did was when I got back home, I put everything into the in the washing machine, dried it, came back out, folded it back up, put it back in again, and I had little bags, like almost like a toiletry bag, where I had my socks, my underwear, my race socks, my arm warmers were in one, leg warmers in one, and everything like that was stacked up. So as long as I saw that every single one of these little bags were full, then I knew exactly that I had everything with me, and then the actual race bag itself. It was just opening up all of those and taking one of everything.
Nice. Very good. And again, the goal is to minimize the mental stress. I think so many times people, you know, you just think about how hard each ride is going to be, and it's so much more than that. You know, like, I think just the mental energy that you spend doing things can be just as, if not more, exhausting than actually just riding the bike. So whatever you can do to minimize that, that's what you need to do. Okay, schedule. And I would love for Maggie to jump in on this and tell me how it was there because I didn't get to go in person. But at least
Yeah.
for me, I know in the past, you think you're going to have this downtime and there never is. There just isn't. You're just always running. And so you just need to accept that and don't plan. Like, oh, I'm going to have time to do this or sightsee or whatever. Chances are you're not, especially when the weather turns against you. It's even, you know, less downtime kind of things. So I always recommend planning out the schedule the day before, looking at the guidebook, looking at the course, review it at night and again in the morning. Know if there's been any changes to the neutral zones or the timing zones. Do everything you can to set yourself up for success. Set out your clothing, your bike. Make sure that you check your bike pre and post ride. Minimize time on your feet, walking around. You know, again, if you have the layout of the town, take a look at it and know I'm going to go from here to, this is what I'm going to do after the race. I'm going to change out of my clothes. Then here's where I go for my food or my snack or whatever. And just plan on minimal communication with family and work. So with that, I'll let Maggie jump in.
I think you're very right there, and there's something that I was told on my very first Tour de France was that grab 5, 10, 15 minutes of sleep whenever you can, wherever you can, in whatever way, form that you possibly can do it. Because if you manage to add up an hour worth of sleep extra per day, over if you're doing the Triple Crown at the Haute Route, that's 21 days, is effectively 3 weeks of going around. So an hour extra sleep per day is effectively, you know, that's 21 hours of extra sleep that you're getting. That's easily 2 nights worth of, if not 3 nights worth of sleep. And certainly when we're looking at the early starts that the Haute Route were doing, and a lot of the times the late finishes as well. So just thinking all the time, can I just, have I got 10 minutes to lie down and just close my eyes? Even if you're not falling into deep sleep, it's still recovery time, where you're completely relaxing, and then get on from there. So set an alarm for when you need to do the specific things so you don't sleep through, obviously, and worry about that. But I cannot stress enough how important those 15 minutes can be after you've had your breakfast, going up, putting yourself lying down on the bed for 15 minutes before you get out again. And the same thing when you come back from the ride. If you've got a roommate who's taking a shower, perfect time, have a sleep. And then just adding up stuff like that will help you massively to recover and actually make this journey so much easier, even if it doesn't seem like it at the time. But when you come into the planning, like you said, Shawn, I think, you know, laying everything out the night before, knowing exactly what you're going to do the night before is a way of obviously eliminating any kind of stress in the morning, and then refreshing it first thing when you wake up, so you know exactly what you're doing and where you're going, what the route is, what climbs you're doing, how long the climbs are. All that sort of stuff is just helping you make your life easier whilst you're out on the road. But at the same time, this whole thing about planning everything obviously sets you up for a bit of a potential that something is not going to go according to plan. So I don't know, here in the UK we've got a saying, it's called winging it. So a controlled form of winging, I find, is the best way forward. So you've got a little bit of sort of fluctuation in everything that you do, which is kind of up to just random elements, and a lot of the time that keeps life a little bit easier, because if you square everything into boxes, those boxes have to line up, and if they don't line up, and it can be quite a big deal for you if you get used to it.
You're one slide ahead of me, Maggie.
Am I?
It's coming. Before we go to the next slide, though, we do have a question, and it's from Ian Horton, and he wants us to talk a little bit about warm-ups and cool-downs, since we're talking about the schedule. Now, what's your advice for warm-ups and cool-downs during an event such as the Haute Route?
Cool-downs is definitely something that I think is very, very important. Specifically, since most of the rides are mountaintop finishes, or certainly you have had a very, very hard ride up there, or within the last sort of half an hour. So I think actually finding a flat bit of road and just pedaling out a little bit and just spending 20 minutes doing that is a good way to do things, and it certainly will minimize or take any lactic acid out of your legs and flush your legs through a bit, and it will aid your recovery quite a bit for the following stage. Warm-ups is something that is, if you're going straight up a mountain from the word go, yes, definitely. If you're there to race it and perform highly at it, it's something that you'll have to do as far as I'm concerned. But it's also a difficult one if you are feeling a bit fatigued. Do get out there and do those extra kilometers on the bike, or do you prefer to sort of ride yourself into it in the beginning of the day? And it also comes down to what kind of a person you are in terms of your sort of your build, your athletic ability. Some people cannot do a cold start. I've done some of my biggest power outputs on a cold start. So it comes down to each individual, and I'm not a big fan of warming up before a road race. I never have been, but that's part of my culture as well. So I think that's it. Looking at it from a bigger picture, it comes down to what works well for you, and it's with so many other things. And when we're coming down to coaching and training and what's to ride on and so forth, it's your personal things and your personal stuff that's going to work for you that you need to do, not what sort of someone else says and so on. It's actually testing it, trying it at home, and seeing what works out in the best way.
Agreed. And at least for me, my personal preference is the same, especially in a stage race. The more days you're racing, the less warm-up you need, because it's just you know, calories and kilojoules or watts that I'm probably going to need out on the course. You know?
Yeah.
And I do find that, you know, your body just, it gets used to it. You know, okay, here we go again. It's day number 3 or 4. Whereas, you know, maybe the day of the time trial when, you know, you're just going to go from the gun for 30, 40 minutes or so, then that's the day you want to do a warm-up. But again, I also tend to err on the side of heart rate versus power output in warm-ups. If you are going to do a warm-up, I like to use, just like I said, breathing and heart rate in high cadence, where you get the perceived exertion, but you're not actually loading up your legs.
It's an interesting one with that one there, Shawn, and it's looking at, so the power output tends to remain very, very similar throughout a longer stage race like this, whereas your heart rate tends to fluctuate an awful lot. And it's something, I've got a short story for you from the Vuelta 2006, I believe it was, where I was going very, very well. And we're coming into the final time trial, so the penultimate day of the Vuelta. Now I started warming up with a heart rate strap on, with my power cranks on as well, so I knew exactly what was going on. So I started doing a progressive build-up, and my heart rate topped out at 147 beats a minute. It would not shift any higher than that.
Yeah.
But the power was still there, so obviously shutting down, starting back up again, trying to sort of gently massage the heart rate up higher to try and get it up to where it should be. And I should sit at, when I'm doing a ramp up effort like that, about 180 beats a minute is what I normally get up to. But again, it wouldn't go any higher than 147 beats a minute. Yeah, when I got out and actually did the time trial, I averaged 580 watts for 20 kilometers.
Wow. Yeah, I explained it wrong. I was saying heart rate, but I guess I meant like high cadence and breathing. You're so right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Awesome. Good point on that. Yes, so Ian, he's asking, so warm up in the neutral zone.
Yeah, why not?
Perfect. Okay, so let's see. I think we're on to where Maggie was ahead of us a little bit. Having a plan,
Sorry.
and that's all right. We're on the same page. And the uncontrollable. I think, again, I liken everything to just one-day races, whether it's a road race, a criterium, even a time trial. You always have to have a plan. Again, you have to have a goal, and you have to have an idea of how you want it to go down. But as soon as you have a plan, you also have to know that it's likely to go out the window in the first 200 meters. And I think Magnus, maybe you can jump in here, but like even with teams and stuff, you guys have a plan for the day, and you have this ideal situation of how you want it to go down. And you're all 100% committed to doing that. However, the likelihood of it actually going according to plan is probably not there, right?
Sometimes, I was going to say something. I was going to use a bad word then, but it's slim to none. I'll rephrase it as instead then. And yeah, it's usually by the time you've done the first 10 kilometers of riding with the team, the other 22 teams have put some sort of a different plan into action, and you're having to cope with that one and work out what what's going to work best for you and your team, in sort of in conjunction with everything else that's happening. And it's the same thing with whatever you do, whether traveling, whether it's getting to a race, whether it's your bike. Certain days, if something happens to your bike, you just got to make the best of it. All these things are just stuff that can happen. It's bike racing up and down to.
Yep. So if you've done everything to prepare as best you can, whether it's training, whether it's packing, whether it's looking at the route for the day or whatever, and it goes out the window, like I say here, when it goes off the rails, and it will, having the confidence of knowing what's going on and the end goal makes it easier to adapt and I think to react to it and just keep moving forward, rather than just having a complete meltdown on the side of the road. And like Maggie said, if you've got all these boxes and they have to be perfectly lined up and then they don't, it's just like, oh my, what am I? You just have to stop and give up. And this way you can say, nope, I know what the end goal is, and there's different ways to get there, and this is what we're going to make the most of it and keep on going. And I think a lot of times that's the difference between somebody who's able to win and somebody who doesn't finish for the day. It's being able to adapt to the surprises that come up. And I also think this is a big part for me where having a coach was so very helpful as an athlete, because it's a support system. It's somebody that you can go to, whether you had a good day or a bad day, and talk to. And it's a little different than calling a friend or a partner or a family member, because they're there just for you. And so you kind of get that chance to vent, or even, boast about how things went right that day. Um, Go ahead, Maggie.
I totally agree with you on this one, and I see. I always saw my coach as he was basically my number one port of call to just about everything. And then I usually called my family and said, look, this has gone on, this has happened, whether there's been a crash, whether I've really hurt myself, or whether it's all gone well. They kind of got a second port of call, and I knew exactly how to. I've calmed down and handled the situation, and could tell them exactly what the outcome was going to be. So there was already a plan in place with my coach, regardless of what had happened on that day. And like I said, it stretched from winning some of the biggest bike races in the world to effectively someone scraping me off the ground down in Qatar and putting me back in the back of a van and driving me to the airport. At the time I'd been taken off the ground, my coach had already organised surgery for me the following day, because you could see I broken my collarbone, and they just drove me straight to the airport. I jumped straight on the flight, and as soon as I landed, I had an hour to get to the hospital, and I wasn't having surgery. That kind of thing is what coaches at a top end level can do for you, and that's why they're so important to have around you as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Good point. Okay, pacing, pacing, pacing. If I had one word to describe, what I did with people for my training or education for this event, it would be teaching them about pacing themselves. And obviously, functional threshold power, is the standard by which we measure everything. And we're going to come back to some other things, but for now, I'm going to skip to the next slide just so we can go over that. And it might be a little hard to see here, but basically on the smaller image, if you can see the red line, it's a perfectly steady line for the rider for this graph that I chose to look at. And this was the second half of the ride. And to me, this just indicates really smart pacing on their behalf. I guess if you look at, there's just a slight decline, towards the end of the last climb, but overall, really steady effort. And this was somebody who did listen to the webinars ahead of time and really took to heart, my suggested pace of 75 to 95% of functional threshold power, which, if you didn't get a chance to listen to the webinars, it's basically your maximum power average that you could put out for a 1-hour time trial, approximately. And so if you look here, this rider, his FTP is 280 watts. And on the third, there's 3 climbs, and actually it was, a third climb broken up into 2 parts. He averaged right in the middle, 85% if you average all the climbs together. So right in the middle of the FTP. He's 51 years old. He's very experienced, and he's fit. He had done the training. And to me, this is just an example of knowing his body, knowing his power numbers, and just riding within himself on the stage. And Maggie?
I got to say that it also shows that he's got the confidence to in himself to go with his pacing strategy and not reacting to what everyone else does. And it wouldn't surprise me if this guy caught most of his mates by the time they got to about the second or third climb of the day, and actually left them by a good half an hour by the time they got to the top of the final climb.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of personal strength to be able to do a ride like this, to actually just say, look, no, whatever happens, I'm staying to my numbers, and I'm staying to what I know I can do, and that will take me to the end quicker, in the quickest possible way for me anyway. But it is very, very difficult to do, and like I said, it's an absolutely spot on effort.
Awesome. Cool. So I just wanted everybody to get a chance to see actually what it looks like when you're pacing yourself based on your functional threshold power. The next thing I did want to talk about is cadence and gearing. And this was something that I did see throughout all three weeks. I can't stress enough that you have 20 or 21 gears for a reason, and that you should use them. And even before you leave for the Haute Route, you should make sure that you have enough gears. Showing up at a race like this with, a 21 tooth, cassette on the back isn't going to be enough. And this is the time when you throw ego out the window and you say, you know what, I'm going to bring more gears, just like clothing. I'm going to bring more gears than I think I need to be able to spin up hills. And again, when you're climbing for, an hour, 2 hours, spinning is a relative term. But you really want to, if you could stay in the 70s, I think that's a great place to be. When you get down into the 50s, you're just asking for injury and trouble, in my opinion. Maggie?
Totally correct. Totally correct. I think anything from 70 and upwards is obviously a better place to be. But again, it all comes down to what you've trained for, what you've prepared for, and also what type of a build you are as a rider. Bigger, heavier riders usually struggle to keep a higher cadence on a small gear because of the different torques that gets put onto your muscles. I always found the bigger the gear I could roll, and certainly the bigger the front sprockets were. So I would be much better off on a 39, or say 40, even 42, and a slightly bigger sprocket on the back than I would be riding a 36 and a slightly smaller, if that makes sense. So the difference for me was just, if I could ride around on a 46 or 48 inside chainring, I would actually be able to climb quite well. Just that I haven't got enough gears on the back to be able to cope with that. And it's something that you go out and try and see and feel what works best for you. Correspond the fatigue that you get with the wattage that you're putting out. See where your heart rate ends up on these kind of things as well when you're doing that particular type of test.
Okay, so we have another question. Can you use your power meter to determine the correct gearing for yourself?
I would say yes.
So how that I was actually going to ask you a question too. What if you're somebody who doesn't live in an area with sustained climbs and you're forced to train on the flats? How do you determine the gearing that's going to work for you? Would you just try to do threshold workouts in different types of gears?
Yeah, I would definitely do that. I would try and actually I come from an area where it's absolutely pan flat up in Sweden, and to be able to get sort of a sustained effort onto and really quite a low cadence onto my sort of into my system, I usually picked the windiest day I could and just went out and tried to ride at a good 30-kilometer time trial into a headwind on the biggest gear that I could turn around. And it was actually relatively similar in terms of the load that ended up coming onto my legs. Obviously at that point I didn't have a power meter, so I couldn't tell you exactly what happened, but I just know the sensation between actually riding up a climb and having a flat road with a monster big gear on and actually being able to push that into the wind. It did prepare me for some pretty decent uphill riding.
Yep, good. And I think you can use the indoor trainer.
Yeah, definitely.
And I do think, I give my athletes different types of workouts to find their ideal cadence at threshold. And sometimes it'll be in one workout, or sometimes it'll be over the course of a week. And we just say, okay, let's try it at 70, 80, and 90 RPMs, a threshold type interval. And, not only do they feel during it, but how do their legs feel after, or even the next day? And I think these are important things that you should experiment with in the months before an event like this.
And to take the two worst examples in cycling, there are two people able to ride the same gear. Not everyone can pedal like our American friend Mr. Armstrong, and not everyone can ride like Jan Ulrich either. They're probably the two most extreme types of pedaling that we've seen in sort of recent modern cycling, where the one German Ulrich used such a monster gear and Armstrong pedaled such a high cadence, but they got up the hills pretty much the same speed.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's individual, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, and the next thing is changing positions on the bike. I think it's really important to be able to switch from seated to climbing and know that the difference, how the workload changes on your body. A lot of times I'll go from seated to standing several times on a long climb because sometimes I'll want to stand up and use my body weight over the pedals. Yes, my heart rate's going to go up, but I'm someone who I know my cardiovascular fitness is going to outlast my muscular fitness. So for me, it's worth it. You know, I go to a couple of harder gears. I stand up. I take a break. I, give my muscles a little chance to relax, and then I can sit back down, let the muscles take over. And the same thing with changing even your handlebar grip. Your upper body gets so darn fatigued over the days, and being able to, move from the tops to the hoods to the drops, I think is really beneficial in just reducing overall body fatigue.
Yeah, totally correct. And it does change your muscle groups that you're using as well, depending on how you stand on the bike, and finding actually going out and practicing this beforehand before you get to an event is a really good idea. Even if you do live in a flat area, for instance, just going out and setting yourself a distance. I'm going to do 5 kilometers here now on a flat bit of road, standing up and never sitting down on the bike.
Mm-hmm.
That will force you to find the balancing point of where your body position needs to be on the bike for you to actually be able to cope with this and do this. If you were to, stand in the wrong position, either your arms will get so fatigued that you can't hold yourself upright, or your legs will be so fatigued that you're forcing yourself to sit back down again. But if you're finding the right technique and the right balance on the bike, you will do that without any problem at all. It's like walking a couple of kilometers then, and that it's well worth the time and effort to go out and just finding that balance on the bike.
Exactly. And I think it's really important. I see so many people who think that just because they stand up means they have to go 100%.
Yeah,
And
no, definitely not.
you can definitely take a rest standing up,
Yeah.
So, and group riding skills. I think some people might not have been prepared for the starts for the Haute Route and just maybe the pack mentality of the event. And again, being confident on the bike, riding defensively and staying focused, you're just setting yourself up for success. The more confident you feel on the bike, the stronger you're going to be able to ride. And I think riding defensively, I don't care who I'm riding with. If it's somebody that they seem like a really cool person, but I've never seen them or ridden with them in my life, I'm not going to trust them. I'm always going to ride defensively. Will I sit on their wheel? Will I sit in their draft? Will I work with them? Absolutely. But I always maintain, I guess, an air of, okay, if this goes off the rails, where am I going? I don't overlap a wheel. I just ride and stay in the moment all the time. I don't let myself get lulled into a sense of security.
Yeah.
Descending.
What Sean said.
You just have to be responsible for yourself, So descending,
Yeah.
practice, 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 ride within your limits. And again, there's that word focus. I may be in, a pace line of 50 or 100 people, and I might be chatting away, but I guarantee you I have, an eye on everything that's going on, whether it's road conditions, whether it's wind, whether it's the people in the pack, their body language, who's spinning, who's pushing a big gear, who is smooth, steady, who's working the hardest, who's working the least. You just can't ever be too sharp on your mental skills on the bike.
No. And also one thing when it comes to descending, the position on your bike and the balance of your position on the bike, so the bike fit effectively, your descending skills I think starts with the bike fit and getting the balancing of your body weight in the center of the bike. If you've got someone who's good to set up your bike, then your descending will be so much quicker, so much more comfortable, less stressful already by the time you've left the bike shop. And then at that point, it comes down to, like you said, a lot of practice. But don't don't necessarily listen to what everyone says around you, what your mates are telling you that you should always hold in the drops when you're descending. It doesn't work for everyone. It's like pedaling style and what gears to use and all that sort of stuff. It doesn't work for everyone. For instance, I cannot descend quickly in the drops on my bike. If you're asking me to go flat out down a hill, I always sit on the hoods. I've got more feel in the brakes. I know exactly what you know, how the bike handles, and I get the most amount of actually the most amount of contact with the handlebars, the saddle, and my body weight ends up in the most balanced position. It just means that I can do more stuff with my bike, and actually react quicker and do more acrobatics if necessary. And if you're looking at the cyclocross riders in the world, there's a reason for why they're riding on the top of their hoods all the time, so they can actually react faster with a bike.
Good point. Yeah. And like he said, it's practice, 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 and that means finding what works for you. You know, there's some basic, you know, ideas that you can follow, whether it's, you know, weight the outside leg, inside handlebar sort of a thing, looking through the corner, maximizing, I call it real estate within the rules. It's, you know, I never, unless I know that it's absolutely a closed circuit race, I always assume that a car is going to be coming around the corner on a switchback. It's just not worth it, you know. And I don't think there was full road closure in this event. And so that's what I say: ride within your limits and stay focused. Chances are you're not somebody who's going to win the race on a descent, but you sure can lose it. And that would just be my advice for that. And minimize stop time. I think even when it's cold and you want to get warm, it's still time on the bike. And any time that you're stopped, it's just dead time. So the more that you can do comfortably and confidently on the bike, whether it's sitting up to take off arm warmers or a jacket or eat something or drink out of your bottle, those are all things that you have control over that have nothing to do with strength. And to me, those are the things that you can really take time out of the competition, whether it's, you know, I'm going to discuss this in a little bit, whether it's time or not, it's still time on the bike. And to me, any time that you're sitting around during the day, you know, on the course, it's just time lost that you can't get back. Anything to add? No?
No, I think that's pretty much straightforward. And like I said, it's time that you could have spent in bed at the end of the day resting up instead.
Yes, exactly. Okay, we covered this one. Maximizing saddle time and recovery time, just like what we said. Maggie, you're always like I love it because you're just always right in front of where I'm going. It's the benefit versus the cost. And this is something, yes, you want to start conservative and ride within yourself, but it's really important to remember that saddle time, even if you're in zone 1, it's still saddle time, or zone 2, it's still tiring. So I did something where I looked at average training load per hour, and we're going to look at this next slide, and it's the benefit versus the cost. And I think this is a really good example of it. The rider on top has this is after 5 of 7 stages, had a total training load of 1457, averaging 60 training load per hour that he was out on the bike. So a little less than 300 per day. Another rider, same thing. And remember, this is based off of functional threshold power. So it's individual for each rider. It's not like I'm comparing them against each other in terms of their effort. So one rode at 60 training load per hour, and the second one actually went slower at 51.7 training load per hour, but it ended up with a higher training load per day. So it's a good example of sometimes working a little bit harder is actually easier. Does that make sense to everyone? So just because,
well, it does to me, but yeah.
you know, so just because someone's going easier doesn't mean that they're going to be less tired. This person's actually getting a higher physiological toll on their body every day because they're going slower.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty awesome to see that. And again, it's a personal thing. It's it's taking into account their individual threshold, so it's not like saying, oh, well, one person is just stronger than the other. It's based on their own current fitness levels. So to me, this is a huge example of sometimes it really is better just to work a little bit harder and get it done, and like Maggie said, get in bed and go to sleep rather than stay out there and take your time. All right, so everyone got that one? A saying that everybody has their little mantras that they say in a race when the going gets tough, and for me, mine was one that my husband taught me, and it was a little bit now or a lot later, a little bit now or a lot later. I could spend a little bit now digging really deep to make the break or make that selection, or I could suffer a lot later all by myself, riding it in alone. And in cycling, we have these things that we call matches, and it's basically putting yourself in a little bit of a deficit and spending a little energy. And ideally, you want to save your matches for the end of a race, but there's also times when it's well worth it to burn the match, to make the selection, because you're going to be able to rest with that group, or you're going to be able to maintain a higher average speed overall. And it's just going to make a huge difference in the long run. I'm sure, Maggie, you've probably experienced this in races.
Yes, definitely, and obviously the fitter you are, the more matches you have to burn, and also the difference in how you prepare yourself is coming down to how many matches you have you're able to burn as well in a day. So you know, there's an awful lot that you can do with this to prepare yourself to be able to have those little digs, and even though you feel like this is going to be a bit too much for you right at this given time, and you're thinking, am I actually going to recover, or am I just going to get onto the wheel of these people and then get dropped again? More often than not, will you get on, suffer to hang on for a minute or two, and then all of a sudden the power output starts coming down, and you'll start to recover if you've actually done the work beforehand and worked through all the different zones and different energy systems that you're required to do a move like that.
Yep, exactly. And Maggie's touched on this several times already. Minimize your chamois time, people. I just can't stress it enough, especially when you're wet and you're cold and you're spending multiple days on the bike. This is probably way too much information, but for me and a lot of racers that I know, it's important to spend some commando time after, in your hotel room too, and just let your skin breathe. But it's really important. We've all seen those people, and if you're guilty of it, well, now going forward, don't do it again. You see the people who it's like 3 or 4 hours after, a ride or a race, and they're still sitting around in their sweaty, dirty kit. It's.
I have to say, I had a friend back when I started racing who actually he started his watch when he put his shorts on, and he didn't actually stop his watch until he'd taken the shorts off, which meant, every time he kept on saying that he had 6 hours of training that one day and 5 hours the next day and 6 hours the next day, and I'm going, how can you train that much? And then I finally worked out what he actually did, which meant that he spent about an hour and a half each side of the training in his shorts. So yeah, that's obviously one way of how not to train.
All right, I think we got that one. Training and preparation. Yes, we've stressed functional threshold power. Training your, the benchmark is about 60 minutes, but actually when you start looking at data, a lot of data, the difference between 1 hour power and 2 to 3 hour power, there's very little drop off. So 60 minutes is kind of what we all use, but it actually goes beyond that. And again, Maggie, he's on it, man. Talking about training all your energy systems, burning those matches. I think a lot of people might have made the mistake going into this event. Well, all I need to do is be a good climber or have a good threshold power. But anytime you're talking about a mass start event, or even in time trials, there's corners, there's turns, there's accelerations. You just have to you have to train all the systems. You have to look at your VO2, which is about your 3 to 8 minute power, anaerobic power, shorter, a minute type of efforts, and neuromuscular training. I think there's a huge benefit in training your body and muscles to adapt to different cadences and accelerations and leg speed, having a smooth, supple pedal stroke, all those types of things. It can happen in starts, surges, attacks. I heard a lot about small rises and roundabouts. You know, it'd be nice to think of everybody as being, you know, a super well-mannered group that, you know, didn't surge over certain, you know, course obstacles or, you know, aspects, but it's a race. And so people are going to look to put the hurt on at any point possible, or it's going to be nerves or other things. And I just think, you know, it's really important that you train all the systems. Maggie?
No, I think you're completely right in what you're saying, and you know, it is so important to go through all this, and also like spend some time out with a group riding through roundabouts and all these little things, so that you know, and not always taking the same line and putting yourself in different positions, and understanding how you can take a different line to everyone else to end up in a different position when you come out of the corner. Use the guys on television. I mean, I bet a lot of you guys are into watching the professionals do the bike racing. Sometimes just pick one or two riders that you look at and really try and focus on those guys for what they're doing, and especially in the last couple of kilometers of a race coming in towards the sprint, usually you get the most amount of corners, the most different type of styles of corners and roundabouts in various different shapes and directions, to understand what to do and how to place yourself and what you can do to get the different lines and get things right can get you out of trouble. It can help you so much to just pick up the speed and actually stay attached to the group that you're with when you go out riding. All these things that you effectively you have an open book in front of you on your television screens as well, in terms of what to do and not to do and so on.
Yep, great advice there. You know, form and technique, working on your cadence and gearing. You know, a lot of it is anticipation of you know, the roundabout or the corner or you know, road furniture, whatever it is, and being in a gear that allows you to react to it. You know, nothing is worse than having to stomp out of a corner, at least somebody like me in my 5311. Maggie might be able to do it, but that's not a good gear for me to accelerate in. And just being able to stay in front of those types of situations and being prepared for them, even if you might not know what the corner is, setting yourself up for the best thing. You know, are you someone who likes the inside or the outside, or what's likely to happen on the inside or the outside of a corner? You know, and draft, you know, group riding skills, drafting, pulling, eating, drinking in the pack. Can you do all that? And for someone like me, it's about being really smart and wily. You know, where can I conserve energy? Where's the wind coming from? You know, how can I do enough work, you know, to be a respected part of the group, but to also minimize the energy that I'm spending? And this is all, I mean, these are all things that, you know, we're covering in a 1 hour topic. This is where having a coach can really help you. If you're somebody who's like, okay, you know what, I survived, but next year I want to go back and kill it. You know, that's when you start thinking about maybe I need a coach to help me through and get the best plan possible to have the best success.
Definitely, I think you're totally right there with everything you're saying, and when it comes down to the gearing and stuff like that, and like you said, the preparation of cornering and everything else, I think there is actually a general rule of thumb that I tend to work on when I'm sitting in a peloton. If I'm pedaling at around about 100 revs a minute in cadence, then I know that I can basically slow down to just about a standstill. You know, as long as we're not obviously traveling at 60 miles an hour or 60k an hour on the I've done 60 miles as well, but 60k an hour on a flat piece of road. But if you're sitting and you're rolling around at 42 kilometers an hour and you're pedaling at 100 revs a minute, you can effectively come to just about a standstill and still power your way out of that on the same gear that you're in. Whereas if you're pedaling down at 70, 80, maybe even less, just 80 revs, and you'll start struggling. 70, and you won't get out of that one again on the same gear, and you end up having to do all sorts of crazy stuff with your gearing to effectively try and start moving forward again. So just have a think of that one. And when it comes to hiring a coach, if you're looking at making improvements, I'm not saying necessarily going back and killing it and trying to win or whatever. If you're looking to make improvements in a good way, then hiring a coach, I think, is probably some very wise money spent. Just because you've got someone to report to, someone that helps you evaluate it, someone to talk to with regards to getting all these little advice and running a few tests with you beforehand, and so on. So you know, that's definitely worth going. And if there's anyone out there, any one of you guys who want to have a chat about something like this with coaching, you know, if you send me an email on m.b.coaching@icloud.com, then we can have a chat about what I can help you with potentially.
Great. And the last thing, you know, was what are the values that are optimal for long-term stress, short-term stress, and stress balance? Basically, this is looking at your fitness over time and how do you go into an event like this, and what happens when you go into an event like this. So the last slide that I wanted to show today is a great example of somebody leading up to the Haute Route and what happened to them during the event as well. And if you can see right here, his gray line kind of peaks up at just about, oh, I don't know, 20, 25 or so stress balance. And that is showing, and you see his orange line takes a dip and his blue line takes a slight dip too. This is the rider tapering or doing the final rest before this event. And I always recommend something, if you're going into a multi-stage or day tour or race, you have to be fresh. You can't go in with any fatigue on your legs. You know, a week out, you've done the training and you've got the fitness that you're going to have for the event. Yes, you want to keep the engine, you know, primed and revving, but you just really want to minimize any fatigue. So you go in completely ready, and then you can see what happens during the week is that short-term stress, his fatigue basically goes through the roof, and his stress balance or his form goes down to the basement. So you know that it's going to take this huge toll. So this rider, I think, went in with a long-term stress or fitness level probably of somewhere around 85, 90, which I would think, you know, is an adequate. This rider prepared well. It's somebody who has a full-time job, a family. You know, they obviously did the training and preparation, and then they rested, and they actually went out and had a very successful Haute Route. Maggie?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, when you see those two extremes as well between the long-term stress, no, short-term stress and the stress balance, when they got peaks like that, then that's a moment as well when you really need to be careful in terms of getting ill, picking stuff up. Your immune system will be very, very low at that point. The higher up the form curve goes, and the higher up the short-term stress and the lower the stress balance is, the more vulnerable you will be to any kind of illnesses as well. So obviously, the more extreme it gets, the worse it gets.
Yep, absolutely. I always say that when you're supremely fit or on form, it's a fine line between, you know, the 53.12 and the 39.25. You know? It's like two extremes. You either have the chainless day or you can't, you know, pedal to save your life. Like he's saying, the better it gets, the worse it gets, is in the two extremes. Yeah. And the other takeaway from this is the importance of what to do afterwards. You really, really, really need to let your body recover from this effort. Yes, you will see a huge bump in fitness, but only if you give your your body the chance to recover from something like this. I always like to tell people or explain it as, you know, yes, his fitness level is through the roof, but at that peak, is that a great day to go out and do a race the next day? Absolutely not. You know, he's got to let his body recover and then reap the benefits from it. And there's different ways to recover. Some people like to take some days off right away. Some people like to kind of slowly wind the engine down. And just like warm-ups, just like descending, it's a totally individual thing I've found, and it's just a matter of experimenting. For me, I like to shut down the engine right away for a couple of days and then start with easy spins. I've also seen people do the opposite and have great success. Maggie, what do you do?
Well, I got to agree with you. I'm exactly like that. It all comes down to, like you're saying, individual riders and the way the individual riders respond to the stress, and how you. I was one of these guys that never really wanted to come off my bike at any point, even sort of straight after a grand tour. I never really liked to sort of be off the bike at any point, because that just meant that it took a lot for me to get back going again. So it's a difficult balancing act with all of these, and like I said, it's so individual as well in terms of how people react to the different stresses on your bodies. But like I said, it's a good rule of thumb, just after a big ride like this, just to have at least a day off, and then maybe start doing something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just got to get that stress balance at least back to zero to start from. And then depending on whether you're doing one-day events, shorter events, things like that, riders can actually, some riders do better with a little bit of fatigue on their legs, but not after an effort like this.
No. Actually, I got to say, most athletes that I've come across at a high level, that race an awful lot, tend to work better with a fair amount of stress on their legs already. It's something like it's almost like it's triggering you to use your brain a little bit more, because you haven't got super legs. And in that way, the slight fatigue actually just makes you think twice about what you're doing and how you're doing it, rather than just going out riding willy-nilly.
Yeah, good point. I like it.
So
and it is true.
A 98% physically fit person with a head that's 100% in the game is a far better outcome than someone that's 100.
Yeah. Awesome point. I think that's all we have for today. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Before we sign off, did anybody have any questions for us? If you want to, use the chat or question box now, or be sure to send us an email or Skype. They're on this slide, magnus@verbcycling.com. Matt, you can also get them on Skype. It's just Maggie Backstedt. Did you have another email, or was that good, Magnus?
Well, no, that one is fine. I've got one from that I'm running with my coaching business as well, which is m.b.coaching@icloud.com.
Okay.
So if it's coaching specific and you would like my sort of talk about my services, then please go to that one. Anything got to do with my power and anything info crank at all, then please use the Magnus@verbcycling.com.
Okay, we'll be sure to send out the slides and any handouts that we referenced during this webinar with an email, so keep an eye out for that. And we'll also post it on our Google and YouTube channels. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Have a great week.
Have a good one.